I think it's worthwhile at this point actually taking a look at that example from Magnus Carlsen, the one that got me to thinking that, you know, this system with a quick e5 might be a good idea. It's from the Vikings A tournament in 2013, and Carlsen's playing white against Hari Krishna, the very strong Indian Grandmaster. The interesting thing about the move order in this game is that Carlsen managed to get a very similar position with similar themes and ideas from Ponziani, the old-fashioned Ponziani opening. Carlsen has proved in recent times that mixing it up in the opening phase of the game has a really destructive effect on people who are renowned for their preparation. They can't quite figure out where he's coming from, and certainly I'm sure the use of the Ponziani in this game completely took Hari Krishna by surprise. Of course, he plays the approved move, knight f6, white plays d4, and now black plays a combative move d5, but after bishop b5 e takes d4 and then e5 knight e4 knight takes d4, you can actually see the remarkable similarity between this and our featured system. In fact, in this particular example, white's got an extra move, pawn up to c3, which kind of makes systems with bishop c5 by black much less attractive. So Hari Krishna played bishop d7, and now we know what white wants to do. He wants to damage the pawns on the queen side and then castle. Excuse me. So white's got this extra move. Is it of any use to him? Well, that's what Hari Krishna has got to try to prove, that c3 isn't of special use to white. We'll recall our first game where Pirro played this move, knight c3. That move is no longer possible. Certainly when white's played c3, systems with bishop c5 are much less attractive, so black played bishop e7. We're going to see an example of c5 next on this video. It's worthwhile mentioning that c5 now looks a little bit loose. White's knight drops back to b3, and it really is arguable whether the advance of those pawns is a good idea for black. For instance, white can immediately think about putting pressure on these pawns by playing bishop e3 on the next move when he's already threatening f3. All the usual themes of our system apply, I would say, in this position. So after bishop e7, obviously Carlsen could have played f3. He decided to play bishop e3 and then knight to d2, trying to budge black's strong knight, and Hari Krishna played his knight back to c5. And now b4 was played, which was a new move at the time of this game. But of course, it's not the type of earth-shattering new move that's going to cause any re-evaluation of this line. White is simply trying to dominate thematically the dark squares in the centre. Hitherto, the move f4 had been played, whereupon black strikes in the centre with f6 and immediately starts to break up the white pawns, knight e6. This type of position is going to be unclear. When you can keep that pawn on e5 supported by a pawn on f4, it's much stronger for you than a position like this, when black certainly has counterplay. So b4 by Carlsen, and now Hari Krishna retreated his knight to b7, a move which was criticised at the time. But let's just see why he doesn't play his knight to e6, because that seems like the way to go here. Well, I think after that white would play knight to b3, again keeping his eyes very firmly fixed on the dark squares in the centre. And I'm not quite sure that black can make it to full equality here. I mean, he can take on d4 and then play f6. We've seen this idea. But white can take on f6 and just play rook e1 with a very nice position. Black's still got his double pawns on the queen side, so white's got an advantage there. White's maintaining a dark squared grip in the centre, and he hasn't even loosened his position by playing f4. So I imagine white's advantage here is something in between slight and substantial. They don't have a chess symbol for that, but I would imagine that's what it amounts to. Going back to the move knight to b3, black can hit with f6, f4 and take on e5. After that, white can play the interesting move knight takes e6. He can then take on e5, and after queen e8, he's got bishop c5. Another very thematic idea. we saw earlier from that corner game how unattractive it is for black to exchange off dark square bishops in this position. Well, once again, I think white has established some sort of edge, and it's noticeable that it's very easy to protect this pawn should it become attacked with rook to e1. So we're reaching one of those positions from this line that could easily occur where black has problems with his dark squares and his potentially very poor light squared bishop. Well, Hare Krishna didn't like that variation. He played his knight to b7, and now Magnus gets on the case with f4 and then f5. I think black put his knight on b7 to jab at the pawns on the queen side with a5. This he's done. f5 is a very ambitious move by Carlsen. I mean, he could have protected his pawn. Let's not forget in the main line white is sacrificing the pawn. And, well, there are some interesting chances for both sides in this position coming out of c5. Certainly that move rook a6 is very similar to the idea of rook b6, rook b8 and then rook b6 that we saw in the graph game. The rook on a6 contributes in every way to black's position. Counterplay against the queenside pawns, defensive possibilities and further counterplay along the third rank. So Carlsen didn't like that. Maybe he thought that was giving black too much, and he went f5, after which Hare Krishna nabbed the pawn. And after queen g4, well, you can see what's going on. From the first game, we understand white is trying to build up this massive kingside attack. Hare Krishna played bishop c3. He could also have considered c5 in this position, after which white has got bishop g5 or bishop h6. Both of these are interesting possibilities. Bishop c3 was answered by rook c1, and again black is trying to bail into some sort of position here after bishop takes d4 and then rook takes a2. He figures that if white's attack doesn't crash home, he's going to win on material. So e6 looks very strong until we note that after f6 the knight on d2 is en prise. So white continues with his plan of dominating the dark squares after knight b3 and then knight c5. Well, knight takes c5 drops the exchange. It also gives white this possibility of e7. Note the extremely powerful white pawn on e6. Knight comes to d6 and queen f3 was played. I think Magnus played this variation and played it in the way that he has because he's an immensely practical player. He's trying to create problems for his opponent at every single turn, confront him with unusual ideas and get to a position which he doesn't like. To his credit, Hare Krishna defends extremely well in this game, but still goes under in the end. So black blockades, white goes rook f2. Just goes to show the power of this dark square grip. It's difficult for black to break it up. Rook a5. Well, maybe he should have gone rook takes f2 and then g6, something like this. Maybe that was the way to smash up the white pawns. But after rook a5, knight b3, rook b5, and now bishop c5. Bishop h5 was answered by queen c3, continuing to focus on the dark squares, and then queen e8 was answered by queen e3. Queen a8. Knight comes to d4, and now rook takes c5, giving the exchange in the hope of regaining it straight away with knight to e4. But Magnus is on the ball. He plays the excellent move here, knight takes c6, and after knight takes f2, king takes f2, queen a2 check, the king marches out to g3. So black has kept his extra pawn, but what sort of position is left? His rook on f8 is inactive. White's king could be in a better spot, but as we'll see after h3 in the subsequent play, Carlsen manages to safety his king. And meanwhile, I just don't like black's chances because of this pawn. This pawn on e6 is completely throttling the whole black game. So rook e8 trying to stop the advance of the pawn. h3 giving the king a bit of luft. Queen comes to a6, queen c3, bishop e2, and now rook takes d5. For an instant, white's pieces are vulnerable, but only an instant, as Magnus recalibrates with knight b4 and then queen c5. Bishop a4, and now a nice move, rook to d7. After queen e4, well, clearly if black takes on d7, the pawn is going to be more than strong. Queen e4 was answered by rook takes c7, and now we see the foresight of the move h3. The white king moves away, and there are no perpetual checks because of the move queen g1. Let's just see this queen f 4 check, king h1, queen f1, and now this nice move queen to g1, defending everything. So king h7 was answered by queen f2, and rook g8 by knight a6. Bishop e8 was answered by rook c5. Queen d3 was answered by knight b4. It's noticeable that white is still dominating on the dark squares. Queen g1, queen d6, of course, by this stage, black is lost. Queen comes up, king h8, and now the scene is set for a very nice finish. And Magnus, well, actually black resigned in this position, would have obliged here with the excellent move knight takes f6. And that's that, I'm afraid. If queen takes d4, rook takes f8. Otherwise, what is black to do? The black queen is overloaded. So whilst that whole game isn't completely strictly relevant in the sense that you won't get that move order from our recommended move order, I think it's very important to see it because it's also a thematic demonstration of how much pressure white can bring to bear by dominating the dark squares. And Carlsen's idea of b4, knight b3 is definitely worthy of note.